Preface for this episode. The following material is not suitable for kids. Viewers' discretion is advised. Welcome, Internet Traveler, to the third episode of the Blue Moon podcast, in which we will take a closer look at another creature who is prevalent in the folktales of Middle and Eastern Europe, and at the same time often mixed up with upirs or vampires. In other words, we shall explore what does a mare in a nightmare stand for. According to Kazimierz Muszyński, in the second half of 19th century, as well as in the beginning of the 20th century, in the Middle and Eastern Europe, the belief in demons or creatures that tormented people by strangling them was still very popular. As a possible origin of this belief, he gave certain sleeping conditions which resulted in difficulties with breathing, and as such, it's quite possible that he was right. After all, who didn't experience waking up in the middle of the night at least once in their lifetime with this feeling of paralysis and pressure in the chest? Due to their particular characteristics of tormented people in their sleep, mares were alternatively called zmory, mory, morawy, gnieciuchy, or sometimes nocule, as they were mostly active at night. Among their abilities, folks would mention an essential skill which allowed them to infiltrate any household, and that was to transform into a small object like a straw or into an animal. Similarly to other creatures, mares were often believed to be the spirits of people, mostly girls, whose body was laying asleep in their own house, while the soul was up for some mischief. Ethnographer Oskar Kolberg wrote down the following accounts from various parts of Poland, Ukraine and Belarus. They say that a nightmare is a friendly neighbor who, at midnight, comes in the form of a moth or mosquito, squeezes through the cracks in the window, and searches for their favorite object. It crawls from the feet, slowly stretches over the victim, and presses up to their chest. However, having caught such a nightmare, they warn to better release it from its bonds immediately and before others hear and see it, because it would threaten the entire house through the influence of its impure spirit and pose a danger to the household inhabitants' prosperity and health. Therefore, stories about being attacked by a nightmare are only told quietly, never spoken about loudly, so as not to provoke it. The form of a nightmare can be taken on by both men and women, and common folk imagine these beings as people transformed by magic into shape of a dog or a cat. They come at night to the room to torment the sleeping, placing their paws on them, pressing them so hard that they can barely breathe, while simultaneously kissing and licking their faces. The nightmare usually repeats its visits at certain intervals, so predicting the time of its arrival is not difficult. One of the means of protection from its advances is changing one's position in bed, for example, turning stomach down. Then, when the nightmare comes and, while licking and kissing the afflicted person, realizes it has reached their back parts, it gets up and, enraged, leaves the house where it was thus shamed and won't show itself for a long time. The nightmare also causes illnesses. Whoever suffers from colic in the head or in the stomach often attributes it to its influence, so they go to have themselves enchanted by a wise man, a soothsayer, or better yet, by a wise woman, because a woman is most effective here, who touches the aching parts of the sick person and with appropriate words charms away the weakness. Under this name, zmora, common folk imagine a certain type of person, almost always women, sometimes men, who have a special property given only to them, so that when they wish, the soul, only at night, separates from the body. The zmora uses this property of theirs only when they are offended by someone during the day to take revenge. The result of their revenge is terrible, as it leads to suffocation. Around midnight, the zmora is supposed to ride out on a one-wheeled cart or barrow, but very slowly, and their pace is also said to be very slow, hence the saying, slow as a zmora. On this cart, they ride up to the house where their unfortunate victim, their target of anger, is sleeping. Then the soul leaves the body so it can squeeze through even the smallest crack, even with the door closed. Having left the body outside the door, it hurries to the bed of the person who offended them to fulfill its dreadful intention. The zmora then lies on the sleeper and, pressing their tongue into their mouth, suffocates them. But one can avoid this kind of death in two ways. The first is to place your legs where your head would usually be. The second, always sleep on your right side, as this is the good side. This mora is as heavy as a millstone when pressing on someone. The fearful, upon waking, promises the zmora bread with butter, and the next morning they gave it to the first woman they meet, as she was the zmora, and thus they remain free from suffering. The braver ones catch hold of something in the night. If they catch a cat, frog, or straw, they hold onto it tightly until daybreak. Then the zmora begs them to let go, promising not to suffocate them again. They demand the zmora to reveal their identity, threatening to cut off its paws or head. The zmora reveals its name, but once freed, it does not stop suffocating them in the future. Zmora can transform into various entities, a cat, frog, straw, etc., and most often gets to the person it suffocates in the form of a straw, through a keyhole or crack in the door. To protect oneself from it, one must carry a needle in their shirt all day long or place a knife in the bed at night. A person tormented by a zmora is usually pale. Zmoras are said to be women who walk at night and suck on a sleeping man. It is said they are thin, pale, often licking their lips, and when they can't find someone to suck on, they go to a pear tree, but most often an aspen tree, and the tree they suck on develops outgrowths, and a person sucked by them, upon having their nipple pulled, produces milk. More and morusy are born this way, and morusy can be recognized by their black eyebrows that meet in a single line. That is why people say black as a morus. They are half human, half spirit, one might say. When their hour comes, from midnight to 3 in the morning, the body remains in bed while the spiritual half of the sleeping mora or morus goes and suffocates, crushes people, or in the absence of people or as assigned to them, trees, thorns and water. If the mora is prevented from going out to suffocate, they become seriously ill or even die. Mori, when they go to suffocate people, are not necessarily aware of it while awake, as they do it in their sleep, taking the form of various animals, most often cats. People have various remedies against more, the most common of which, especially used by young farmhands sleeping in barns and stables, where more naturally have the easiest access, is this. When a farmhand wakes up at the moment when a mora was suffocating him, he immediately grabs a knife and thrusts it firmly into the wood of his bed. In this way, he pierces the mora, either wounding or sometimes even killing it, and finds a pale corpse pinned to the bed in the morning. Some villagers, going to sleep, cross their hands on their chests to ward off more. However, a more effective method is said to be placing a small jug covered with fresh dough under their pillows. In that case, the mora will never appear. Quite often in the folk tales, MARES would be described as anthropomorphic creatures, as in the following record by Wojcicki. It is a tall, thin apparition, but well-proportioned, with legs longer than those of ordinary people. Those who have seen the zmora on a bright, moonlit night noticed that the moonlight shone through her white body as if through clear amber, so much so that one could count all her ribs and bones. She walks with a slow step, as if on stilts, and can open any locks, whether in cottages, manors, or palaces. From the above accounts, a consistent image of a mare emerges, and it seems that the origins of this creature are understood differently in different regions, but still they fall into two main categories. One may become a mare due to their unfortunate birth as the 6th, 7th or 8th daughter in a family, which causes them to have two souls, a good one and a bad one, or if during the ritual of baptism the formula was misspoken. Or alternatively, a mare could be a demon or evil spirit of a person who died in a bad way, i.e. by suicide, murder, etc. In the cases of Nocule, which were understood as nightly demonic creatures, almost exclusively females, whose favorite pastime was tormenting newborns, mostly in the Middle Poland during the 19th and 20th century, mother would often use magic formulas to protect their babies, especially during the so-called bloody sunset. It was said about this phenomenon that the sun was setting na zażar. It was required to cast the following spell: Zarze, zarze, zarzycki, weźcie memu dziecku nocnicki. Another method was for the mother to sit with the newborn child either near the window or to stand with them in the doors, while the firstborn boy would run around the hut screaming. Are there any nocnice here? to which the mother would answer, "They are." And in turn the boy would shout 3 times, "Let them perish, let them vanish." This brings us neatly to the most important topic, which is to study different ways that can be used to safeguard oneself from MARES attacks. As Leonard Pełka mentioned in his book, these various methods may be divided into 2 general categories. The first category includes activities which can be described as both practical and magical in nature. Pełka lists here the following options that were said to be useful. On the second night, after you were attacked by a mare, it is advised to change either the sleeping place or position, or even better, not to fall asleep at all. And of course, if Zmora already attacked you, the next day you should always go to a healer for advice. It was thought to be beneficial to burn the straw on which the victim was first attacked and then guard the person overnight so that the creature would have no access to them. As for the place to sleep, in general you should avoid sleeping on barley straw as it was considered unsafe. When readying yourself to go to sleep, it's important that you consider the following sleeping positions as a means to protect yourself and try to fall asleep with one leg crossed over the other, or more specific, with the left leg crossed over the right leg, or fall asleep with one finger crossed over another in the right hand. Also, remember to avoid sleeping on your back and instead try to fall asleep on your stomach or on your right side, which is considered the good side. And while falling asleep, do your best to keep moving your big toe. You may also want to use some magic tools, amongst which there are quite a few considered especially useful against a mare. For example, an axe or another iron object placed either on the bed or near the bed. A stick kept under your pillow so that it is close at hand for defense purposes. A knife placed upright next to the bed. Alternatively, you may try falling asleep holding a brush with the bristles facing up on your chest. Note that falling asleep with bread in your mouth should also do the trick, though this option sounds awfully like a choking hazard to me. And in the event that you are lucky enough to hear the Zmora approaching, you should get up and sit for a moment, but even if she is already pressing down on you, all not is lost yet, as you can still try and save yourself by throwing her off and getting up. The second category of various techniques, which can be used against a mare, is also magic in its nature, but with a clear influence of the Christian tradition. Amongst these methods, there are at least 2 which refer to cleansing the space where the Zmora attacked, either by sprinkling the house with holy water and then drawing 3 crosses with holy chalk near the door handle, or just drawing a cross on the door. To prevent the attack in the first place, you should say your prayers diligently every evening and make sure to use incense made from holy herbs in the sleeping area for good measure. Obviously, it is always good to keep holy water beside you, as it is the sort of all-in-one demonic repellent, and if you suspect that the mare is aiming for you, consider falling asleep with a picture of Saint Benedict placed neatly on your chest. Still, I can well imagine that you were surprised by a vicious attack and had nothing from the above-mentioned tools at hand. In such case, pray with all your might, and if Zmora approaches, you should cross yourself fervently. If you survive to tell the tale, don't forget about receiving the sacrament of confirmation afterwards, if you hadn't had it before. And here we are. And now you know that there is nothing to worry about, for there is a wide array of tricks up your sleeve, which you can use should one of those nights you feel a sudden pressure on your chest. Farewell, internet traveler. Postscriptum. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, please leave a like on the video or a comment beneath it, so that I know to prepare more content like this one. For now, I invite you to give a listen to the vampire-related audiobooks. Perhaps Carmilla would be a good place to start. Already available on the channel. And for more vampire lore, please check out the other episodes of this podcast. Take care.